Welcome back to the Charting Life podcast, where we try to explore the overlooked or unexamined parts of life, and always through meaningful conversations and with a healthy dose of laughter. Today, I have a guest on. His name is Lee Monroe. I will let him talk a little bit about his stuff, but he's has a really interesting journey. I've been following his story online a bit, and I think it's really worth sharing. So, Lee, welcome. I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. My name's obviously Lee Monroe. Um, I'm 30 years old and I am a Christian, a father, a husband, and I'm an author, so a fantasy author. And I also am going to be working at a federal prison here soon. I've got nearly a decade of correctional experience, so that's kind of me in a nutshell. Um, probably the most important things about me. Ranked first to to the next in
Yeah.
line.
All right. Yeah. And so honestly, there's a few different ways that um, things are worth exploring just in that. But I guess offhand, do you have any kind of hobbies or interests? I mean, I know you're obviously an author, and so that might take up a lot of your time
Yeah.
there. But do you happen to have anything else that you just really like geeking out about?
Yeah, I mean, like you could ask me a bunch of nerdy stuff and I would geek out about that. I'm kind
Mhm.
of a theology buff now. Ever since I became, Christian, it was kind of interesting because I started diving into, how do I follow, Jesus
Mhm.
and I really dove into that and it kind of led me into learning a bunch about different um denominations and I formed some opinions on that based on a bunch of the research that I've been doing, and so now I've been reading, a bunch of different theology books, and I'm really into apologetics now. Not like I've made it a professional thing, but I do try and preach the gospel and talk to people and defend defend my faith a little bit. So I'm really into that. And so because I've always been kind of interested in in a debate. I'm very much an arguer, some people might say. I really, something I kind of realized and I've been really realizing about myself here lately, um, is that I'm very much an evidence-based person. I came to Christ because I'm an evidence-based person. I made him, try to make him the best I can, the center of my life, because I really do believe the evidence. I believe the evidence for him, and so you know, I'm the type of person that when you got evidence in front of me, I kind of buy into it. And if the evidence says, and there's not enough counter evidence to a claim,
Mhm.
then I go, okay, yeah, this makes sense, and I believe it. And I try to change my perspective to match what the evidence tells me. Now, of course, we shouldn't blindly accept evidence. We should test it and look at it
Mhm.
and make sure that it's actually verifiable. And so that's what I try and do. And so I have a hard time understanding why some people won't accept an evidence-based claim. So if you make a claim and it's like, okay, this is based off the evidence, for me, it's like that's done deal. You should accept that.
Mhm.
And I should have realized this a long time ago, but from what I'm learning is that's not how a lot of people work. A lot of
Right.
people will operate based off their feelings, and they'll filter things through those feelings. Whereas me now, at least now that I've come to Christ, everything for me is I try to center it through God's word. That's kind of what He's given us, and so that's kind of how I try to center my life. And so um, that's been a huge focus for me lately. But sometimes I still play. When I have time, I'll play video games. But I'm writing like all the time right now. I have
Mhm.
another full-time job going up. I'm at church four times a week. So, plus I'm a father. I have a newborn, um, and I
Congratulations.
have yeah, thank you, and I have two other kids. So I'm pretty busy. So I don't always get to play video games, but I read a lot um, all the time. I love reading, and so I read constantly. So that's kind of a little bit about me. I could go deeper into
Mhm.
my testimony, but if you want, but otherwise, I mean, that's pretty much it. You know, if you ask
Yeah.
me about a topic, I'd probably be able to nerd out on it. It just depends
Awesome.
on what it is.
Yeah. All right. And I think we'll definitely want to explore um, some of your testimony, but, you said a few things that's really interesting in there. Um, you know, trying to figure out the best way I want to go through this. So you said you're also a corrections officer as well. So is that working in the prison system or
Yeah.
jail, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So, well, correctional officers can work in a jail, although those
Hmm.
tend to be they tend to have sometimes a different title. They'll call them deputies.
Okay.
I guess it depends on where you're at. I'm not going to sit here and say that's definitively the case for every single
Hmm.
person and every single place, but correctional officers primarily will they'll work in prisons, and that's where I worked for almost a decade. I worked at the in I worked at a state prison here in Indiana, and then but now, I left that after, like I said, almost a decade to pursue full-time authoring, and it hasn't gone badly. It's not been consistent pay-wise as I expected it to be. Um, and I thought that I was going to have a little bit more leeway with the funds that I got. And it turns out that I was kind of way off base on that.
Hmm.
But, so now I'm like, I'm slaving away at the computer for almost 16 hours a day, and
Yeah.
it no longer started to feel fun for me. It started to feel like, okay, I'm having to do this because I'm constantly having to sell the next book.
Hmm.
This will give me some breathing room to go to my job, work that job, which I don't mind. I don't hate it anyway. And then I'll have some breathing room to also write on the side of it. But yes, correctional officers work in the prison system, to answer your question.
Gotcha. Is there anything, I guess on that end, um, maybe myths or anything that people tend to believe about the corrections officers, or maybe even anything you might see in movies? It's like that's not right.
Huh. Oh man, it's kind of interesting when you have a job that like people often will see in media. Um, it's interesting to me because you'll see it in media, but when you go and actually do the job, now you have a hard time watching anything that has that because
Hmm.
you know it now, so you're hyper focused on critiquing it.
Hmm.
Um, but for me, I think that I mean, you'd probably have to ask me about a specific myth, but there's a couple that
Okay.
I think are interesting, which is that people seem to have this idea that I'm not going to say everyone believes this, but some people have this idea that a lot of correctional officers are, like they're corrupt, and they're just out to hurt people. And I don't think that's the case. I view correctional officers a lot like I view police officers, except for in prison. Some prisons,
Hmm.
I think the standards are a little bit lower. I'll be honest about that. Um, but because there's sometimes where I really feel like the prison system's like, we're just going to take a bunch of people, throw them at the wall, and see who stick. And
Yeah.
when you do that, yeah, you're not going to get a lot of. Hold on one moment.
Oh, sure.
Sorry, I have kids that are wanting to be
You're
well, they
good.
should
You're
be in
good.
bed. But anyway, the other issue is that so I don't think correctional officers, a lot of them they're just trying to do their job and the best that they
Hmm.
can. I can tell you we don't like being called guards. Everyone calls us guards.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's just something that it doesn't really bother me anymore. It's not like I'm sitting there, like I'm going to go out of my way to be upset with people. But it's just something that's like, well, no, my title's officer, correctional officer.
Hmm.
I don't guard things. I do a lot of the same things police officers will do. I'll escort inmates. I will do targeted searches, sometimes random searches. I'll remove contraband. I'll put it in evidence. I'll bag it. I will. I'm not going to sit there and say that I do full-blown investigations. Although when I was a part of SART, which is called the
Hmm.
Sexual Assault Response Team, I did do um, a little bit of investigative work. Um, so I've done things of that nature. So correctional officers do a lot more than just, you know, rounds and opening cells. I mean, we do that,
Right.
um, but it's more than that. And I actually think that in some ways it can be actually a little bit more violent
Hmm.
than police officers, because there's many police officers that'll go a long time without having any type of big problem, right, with or interaction or altercation.
Right.
Um, and if they do have one, that's like rare, which I know that a lot of people don't think that with the media these days,
Hmm.
reporting on every minor police interaction ever.
Right.
But that actually doesn't happen all that much. Um, there's thousands of interactions that happen every day, all the time, across the United States, tens of thousands probably. I mean, if you were to add it
Hmm.
up, that are perfectly peaceful. But a correctional officer, you have to understand, we're dealing with the people that have already been arrested, the criminals that are
Yeah.
already there. These are all criminals. Now, I'm not going to sit there and say that, look, I have a belief that says we none of us are righteous, none of us are
Hmm.
good, and so I believe that about all of us. But the reality of the system is that God, for whatever reason, has chosen to put their path there. And, I'm different and I try to be an example and I try to do better to represent Christ in these places because it can be a very dark place. But again, people have to understand that I'm dealing with criminals.
Hmm.
And because I'm dealing with criminals, you're getting a lot more uh, you're getting a lot more violence. You're getting a
Hmm.
lot more problems. What's interesting is once criminals go to prison, they don't stop doing the crime. They keep
Right.
doing the crime. They just find new ways to do it. Some ways, and sometimes correctional officers get involved in that crime. But most people that are there, most officers, they actually hate it when that happens because it actually endangers our lives. When you've got other
Yeah.
officers that bring in more drugs, I mean, that makes my life more dangerous. I can't tell you the amount of interactions I've had with an inmate because he was hyped up on some drug that I later find out because he's getting, we call it getting walked out, um, which essentially means in some cases, but not all the time, getting arrested because he brought in that drug. So it's like, oh, my kids almost lost me because of actions that you took. Because if you hadn't brought it in, they wouldn't have got it. Now, there are sometimes drones that come over, they'll drop things. As long as you have the human element there, you're not getting rid of it completely.
Right.
Um, but in some ways, I don't have any ill will or malice towards them, but I would make it probably a lot harsher, I think, if I could, in the sense of depending on the prison you go to, they can do a lot more than I think they should.
Hmm.
I mean, I could talk for hours about this one subject. They can do so much more than I think they should be able to do. You have um, people that uh, literally at the prison I'm going to work right now, there are some inmates that you will give them keys and they will drive around outside the prison because they only have a certain amount of time left on their
Hmm.
sentence, and they'll just give them
Okay.
keys. And so because they're seen as more trustworthy, they're given keys and they can drive around. I mean, that one's bonkers. Not only
Hmm.
that, though, you've got people that, they go out to rec and they've got, I mean, I used to be a rec supervisor for a little while too, towards the tail end of my 10 years. And they've got, Xboxes and things like that there. They've got, pool tables. They've got all kinds of things. And in a lot of prisons, they have their own consoles and things like that in their cell. And so
Oh
there's just
wow.
things that they have, yeah, there's things that they have access to that I would not give them. For me personally, if you go to prison and taxpayers are paying all this, you'd be working in some way, some form. There would not be
Yeah.
anyone who's idle because you've got people that are idle. And that essentially means they do nothing. They sit around the dormitory, they eat ramen noodles, they work out, they do whatever, but they do nothing. So for me, you would either be in a program, which means you would be doing something productive, or you would have a job. You would not be allowed to be idle. And if you do choose to be idle, I would strip every privilege away from you that I possibly could. And it's not me being harsh. It's, I'm not trying to be necessarily, but I think that you almost deserve to be in that sense. And the reason why I say that is because, again, you're there to because you committed a crime. And while I do
Hmm.
believe that we're all sinners and you can find redemption in Christ, the reality is you still need to serve that earthly sentence for the crime that you committed. Um, and furthermore, I just don't think that the taxpayers should be just paying for you to just sit around there. You
Yeah.
should have to do something. You're there, you should have to do something productive. So anyway, I could go on and on about prison, but that's kind of where I'm at with.
Yeah, that absolutely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You're good, man. You're good. That actually it brings up. There's two questions I want to ask. One is maybe a little bit more light, and one a bit more on the serious side. But you mentioned the contraband. Have you seen anything that really kind of made you step back at either how creative somebody was or the wildest kind of contraband that
Oh,
somebody has?
yeah, there's a lot. I found a sword on one guy. Like he had made an act like he went to metal working shop because they can get a degree, there and they have education. Um, and this guy had made an actual sword and he put it down his pants leg and he was walking funny. And he tried to pass it off as an injury, but when you work as a correctional officer for a little while and you get used to seeing people lie to you, um, you you kind of learn. And this guy just had a look on his face where I was like, okay, yeah, he has something, and you can just tell.
Hmm.
So yeah, I go over there and I pat him down. And I pull out an honest, I pull out a sword. It was like the guy had made an actual sword. But I found also weird things. I mean, there was one day I came across. Sometimes I like to play Dungeons and Dragons, so it's interesting because
Hmm.
I came across a group of people that had made their own. They made their own dice sets. They made their own Dungeons and Dragons sets. They had their book pages printed out. But sadly, they're not allowed to have dice, so I had to confiscate their dice. They
Oh
weren't
yeah.
technically allowed to have any of it because you're not allowed to alter property. So I could have taken it all. Um, and some would argue that I should have, but I just don't think that you need to be a RoboCop. You're given some
Right.
discretion, and the dice I was concerned about because those are kind of a bigger deal, and can also be used for gambling. And I don't know if they're only using it for Dungeons and Dragons. So
Hmm.
um, I did take the dice, and I said, look, you're gonna have to figure out a different system. Sorry, but um, it's interesting what they'll make. I mean, you'll see all kinds of ingenuity coming out of them, especially like food wise. They'll
Hmm.
make pizza out of ramen. They'll make burritos out of ramen. I mean, the things that I've seen done with ramen is wild. But yeah, they make tattoo motors. I mean, I pulled
Yeah.
tattoo motors from them. All kinds of like really interesting and weird things. I won't mention some of the other stuff I found, but yeah,
Sure.
it's it can be weird, it can be disgusting. Um, I mean,
Yeah.
especially the things that they'll do. It's yeah, but anyway, I found a lot of interesting stuff like that. Yeah, 100.
And I had a guy on several episodes ago. He actually was on the opposite side where he was in the prison system a bit. I think a lot
Yeah,
of it was well. Anyways, he was in I think a couple of times, and the last time it really stuck with him, and he started getting his life changed, and ultimately came to Christ shortly after he
it's
left
awesome.
the last time. But
Yeah.
he definitely did start changing that last time he was in there. I'm curious if you've seen anybody like that where you're like, okay, this person's actually making a change.
Well, what's interesting is that the amount of people that I've seen that say that they're making a change,
Hmm.
but then the amount of people that I've seen that seem to be making a change, but then fall again, and I see them come
Hmm.
back. I used to work in intake housing unit. And so I get all the new guys. I mean, I've seen guys leave and come back a week later. Um, and they'll sit there and swear up and down, I'm not coming back again. And then they come back. And because here's the reality, we're sinful people. We fall to
Hmm.
temptations. I'm not immune to that. I've had temptations and things that I've fallen to, especially since coming to Christ. I don't think they've not been as bad as drugs or other crime or things like that, but we're going to keep fighting our flesh, and um, that's kind of why we need to persevere in the faith, because what happens is that you'll fall, but Jesus says, "Get back up. I paid for that. Continue walking
Hmm.
with me." Now, I have seen people that have left and cleaned themselves up and have got companies now and um, all kinds of other stuff that's just awesome.
Hmm.
But um, I've also seen guys that I really don't think are, I guess, because again, I do believe that we're all sinners, but in the sense of like how I would how I would put it, I don't think that they're terrible guys. I think they're human. Like we're all human.
Hmm.
There are some people that I've seen that I truly do believe are possessed and demonic
Yeah.
and truly of the devil, that I just don't see any redemptive callers. But again, Christ can redeem anybody. But there are people that had me questioning, where I was like, man, I
Hmm.
I don't know. Like I certainly don't know if I would be able to plant a seed there. I'll tell you that just from how they were acting. That being said, I don't have any malice towards any of those guys. It's kind of an interesting dynamic being a correctional officer. Then you have these inmates, because but also it's an interesting dynamic being Christian, because you have this balance, right? Because we're called to try and be salt and light, and we're called to try and spread the gospel. Jesus tells us, go out and make disciples of all men, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so I try and do that. And being in a prison can be a harsh mission field, especially when you have responsibilities. I can try and be nice, but they'll take a mile. They will manipulate that,
Hmm.
right? They'll manipulate the niceness.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but especially when you're dealing with a group, as you often do. So they will try and manipulate that, and they will try and pull on that. And unfortunately, that makes it very hard. So you have to be a cross between firm, respectful, but not so nice that you invite manipulation. And there's just a mutual distrust there, because you've got people that are going to try and take advantage of you, and then you've been lied to so many times it's hard to maintain, that trust. And at the same time, I'm trying to be like, how can I represent Jesus?
Hmm.
So it's a challenge when you're trying to be a Christian. Now, if you're not trying to be Christian, if you're not Christian, as I for many years I wasn't when I was doing this job, then you just don't care. It becomes a dynamic of, I kind of had a rule for myself. I'm going to treat you like you're human until you stop acting like it.
Mm.
So for
Okay.
me, it was, now this is before I came to Christ. So for me, it was like, hey, look, you want to be respectful towards me? I'll be respectful towards you. You want to, you know, but the moment that you try and cross that line, or I think you're manipulating me, or I think that there's something else going on, okay, well then now there's going to be consequences, and I'm going to make your time a lot harder than it needs to be. Um, and I could do that numerous different ways. I can go and take some of your luxury items. Some people had pillows. I'd take those. You
Hmm.
have headphones that are wrapped. I'll take those. Um, and I used to go through and just take all this stuff that they really wanted, and that would cost them extra to buy in commissary if they wanted it back.
Hmm.
So I would take that stuff and say, okay, we're going to shape up, and then you'll get it back. It's a lot like dealing with children. You'll get this back when you shape up. I'm going to take this
Yeah.
from you. You'll get it back if you're good later. Um, that was kind of very much how I did. It works with them just as well. Um, there are other times where I would employ other tactics that I stopped employing after I became Christian, because they were sins that I'm not proud of.
Hmm.
Not deliberately hurting anybody, but I would go in and um, one thing that I used to do before I became Christian is I would sit people out in the day room, and I would go through and shake down, meaning I would search every bunk besides the person I had a problem with. And I would say, if you guys have an issue with it, take it up with that guy. And so they would be mad at him
Mm,
because he was causing issues. Because the one thing that about most inmates, or at least some, they don't like being messed with. They don't like their
right.
operations messed with. They don't like uh, things being, they don't like a bunch of officers coming in and messing with their time. Now, where I was at state prison, which is 10 years or less, you had a lot more of that because there's younger guys there that just uh, they have authority issues. Some of the older guys were a lot easier to deal with because we call it being down. They've done a lot of time, and so they were easier to deal with because they're just like, look, man, I just want to live and then get out of here. I don't want to be bothered. So they would often go to those guys after I was done doing all that, and then suddenly I wouldn't have a problem with them anymore.
Hmm.
Don't know what they did, but I'm sure it wasn't good. Now, I've since, of course, repented of that, and I handle things a little bit, differently now. It's I try to be respectful. My new sort of mentality is be respectful even when they're not. Never stoop to
Right.
their level. Always try and make yourself salt and light because you can't combat, hatefulness and darkness with more of the same. All you're doing is bringing more darkness. You're never bringing any light. Um, and so my last few years there, especially as a rec supervisor, I spent a lot of time talking to people about Jesus. I spent a lot of time trying to um, help in the ways that I could that were appropriate, in the sense of like I would never let myself be a counselor, but I would direct them to the places that I felt could help them. I would give them uh, advice that I thought was um, decent advice for the experience that I had, and I directed them to people that I thought would help them, better. Am I going to sit here and say that suddenly makes me a good person? Nope. Still not righteous. God, I'm still guilty.
Sure.
It's just that Jesus, paid that sentence for me. But there was a change there because I cared more. Before I didn't. And
Right.
then now I did. So my mentality shifted. And so instead of me sometimes seeing them as not human, I would always try and see everybody as human, made in the image of God.
Yeah.
It's interesting how Jesus does that, how he transforms
Yeah.
people like that.
Absolutely. No, that's a really big change, and that actually answers one of the questions I was going to ask. Was what was your like? How did you? What was your transition of faith like for your job?
Oh,
And so
yeah,
so you really answered that question quite wonderfully, and I think that's really important. And that last bit that you said, that the idea that we're all created in the image of God, and so
yeah,
that is that's a really big deal pay attention to, and um, when you actually get that and you start to
yeah,
live according to that, man, that changes everything. The people
yep,
who you love and the people who you don't like so much, the people who hurt you, even like, I used to say it like this: is God doesn't give us the freedom to hate any individual person. Now I can hate what you
nope,
do with the image of God. So it'll be like,
yeah,
even the worst of the worst is still creating God's image. But what you do
yep,
with that image, how you destroy yourself and you try
hmm
to destroy the image of God in yourself or in others, that can be something that we can be totally opposed to and against. And that's why, we want
yep,
to fight hard to uh, not only to do the right thing, for us, but also be able to shape things and the best we can do, but in our families and even communities, to be able to do the best for other people who are creating God's image. And so I think that's really important, a great important point that you made there. So,
yeah. I really, it's interesting when you get that because, like you said, I just want to kind of piggyback off of it because 100%, like when I started understanding not only that I'm my own sin, that I'm guilty. When I understood that, and then I understood that everybody is created in God's image. Not everybody is necessarily a child of God. I'll hear that sometimes, and I don't think
sure.
Scripture supports that. But we're all made imago Dei, made in the
Mhm.
image of God, and so I try and treat people that way, and that can be hard. I mean, I'm not going to lie and sit here. I do it perfectly every day. I don't. There are times, especially some recent interactions, where I'm like, I don't think I acted in the way that Jesus would want me to act there. And we just got to keep going and confess that, to God, and understand that Jesus paid for it, and try and keep doing better. It doesn't make the sin okay. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be held accountable necessarily for that. I'm a full believer in, you could do something horrible, you can get redeemed by Jesus, and then we can also just lop your head off right after. I'm a full believer in doing that.
Hmm.
And I know that's harsh. I said that one day to to I think my pastor in church, my assistant pastor, and he looked at me funny. He thought that was I don't think he agreed with me. That's okay. I love him anyway.
Yeah,
He doesn't have to agree with me. But I think that the Bible makes a case for that. I think that you can legitimately um, anyway, yeah, I think you can legitimately do something horrible enough that it deserves an earthly consequence. Um, and we don't have to take joy in delivering that consequence. We
sure.
don't have to take joy in you getting hurt, but we can recognize that justice is something that God loves and in many ways commands. And we have to sometimes carry that out. Um, because I also think some sins are worse than others. I mean, when Jesus stood before Pontius Pilate, he said, the one who caused me to be here, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing now because I'm trying to
Right.
remember the scripture,
That's
but
the one who
the
handed
one
me.
that caused me to be here, he has the greater sin,
Hmm.
So he was talking about Judas. And so to me, Jesus clearly in several different places in the Bible talks about there being a greater sin. That doesn't mean that all, like, oh, I committed a lesser sin, that's suddenly okay. No, God hates all sin. He hates sin. But I think that, again, to a certain degree, um, you can carry out justice and it's fine. But forgiving somebody doesn't necessarily mean letting them be free of consequence. And so, anyway, I just wanted to piggyback off that on what you were saying because, yeah, I think that when you understand Imago Dei, it shifts. Jesus forgave the people that were murdering him. They were murdering him in the midst of killing him. Now, my sin put him on that cross too, just as all of ours did. But he was in the middle of dying, and they forgave him. I often look at it this way: what would the world be like if Jesus said, "Oh no, I don't like that particular sin, so I'm turning away from you," or "You did
Hmm.
that particular thing, so I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna accept, you." Like, I just don't think that we should gatekeep like that because Jesus doesn't gatekeep with you.
Right.
I've said this before, but there are people that, like, they'll say something hateful to somebody else, and I'll sit there and say, the only reason you're not going to be burning in hell right along with that person is because of what Jesus did.
Hmm.
The only, like, you're not better. You're not better. It's just someone served the sentence for you. And so you should act like that, and you should want them to have their sentence served as well. Um, and so, yeah, I try not to get hateful with anybody. I try not to use um, vulgarity toward anyone. I try not
Hmm.
um, to be that way. Now, there have been some recent things with the Candace Owens supporters, especially in um, anyway, these
Yeah.
Candace Owens supporters that I've talked to across the internet that I've said not said some great things to. I have never been like absolute vulgar, but I have said things like, I've called them some Jezebel spirits and things like that. And
Okay.
because I felt really righteously angry. And
Hmm.
later I kind of had to bring that to God, and I'm still not sure yet whether I was right in that, because I think that there is a case to be made from scripture that you can make harsh judgments like that when someone's doing something harsh enough, but I'm not sure yet if it was hate coming from my heart or if it was a justified thing. So I've been in
Yeah.
prayer kind of about that a little bit, but I just I realized I had to block a few of those people because I just couldn't deal with having all the hate and bitterness, I think. And it really drives me up the wall that there are people out there that would drag a Christian martyr's wife through the mud. But
Hmm.
anyway, all that to say, yeah, I really agree with you.
Yeah. And I know the online stuff is such a man, that's such a world that you get mixed into. And it's, social media has its benefits, but it also has plenty of drawbacks, as we all know and see. But I think that idea of being open to maybe I was wrong when I did this, what
Yeah.
like, you know, whether or not you were right or wrong, where however that God seems to show you, whichever whatever the direction was. The fact that you're willing to say I may have been wrong on that is incredible, and that shows a
Yeah.
great deal of character. And that's something that we all should be able to try to do that and ask ourselves, am I really wrong here? Did I do this wrong, or am I going to be stubborn about it? And so I think we all have something like that that we could probably examine ourselves and figure that out. This has been a great conversation. There's one last
Yeah.
section I want to go into, and these are my rapid-ish fire questions. They don't have to be a one sentence, but we kind of make them a little bit
I'll try
shorter.
to keep my answers short. Yeah.
Okay,
You're
I'm
challenging me here,
yeah, right.
so
I'm
I'll
kind of the
try.
same way. But all right, the first question is there is a new island that's been discovered. You're tasked with going to explore this island and chart the map and all that sort of thing with it. You can bring 5 people with you, living or dead. Got to be real people, and we can't take
Real
Jesus because
people.
he's already, he's
I was gonna say, yeah,
yeah,
he's still alive, and
yeah, it's
but he's
exactly.
God.
Yeah.
So
Right. So the only two caveats is one person has to be a storyteller of some
all
kind,
right,
and then another person
okay,
has to be help you survive. And that could be a celebrity person, or it could be somebody who's kind of good with the woods
okay,
or what have you.
all right, okay. Um, First one, I would take my wife. I don't want to subject my children to this island. I will subject my wife though. That's fine. She can come with me. Second one, I think would be this for the storyteller would be Jim Butcher, who wrote the Dresden Files. Sorry, Jim, but you're coming on the island with me. I need to know how Dresden ends, so he's gonna be coming with me. I love that guy. He is one of my heroes. I would probably take the Apostle Paul with me. You know, he's actually really boring. One guy actually died during one of his sermons, which I
Yep.
shouldn't laugh, but I think it's hilarious. But he raises him
Yeah, they brought him back to life, so
earlier,
it
but
counts.
it's all good. But anyway, I think that I'd bring Paul because I just think that it'd be awesome to learn from Paul. Um, I think I'd probably bring Athanasius and Thomas
Okay, yeah,
Aquinas with me. Um, and those would be some interesting discussions. Maybe like someone who knows their stuff, like an explorer. I don't know,
mhm,
Theodore Roosevelt, Alexander Hamilton,
yes, okay,
uh, someone like that. Someone who, maybe a fighter of some kind. Someone who knows, who can defend ourselves,
yeah,
can defend us. Because I wouldn't be very good at it. So
right.
probably
I like
somebody like that.
yeah,
That
I
would
like
probably be
all
my pick.
those. Yeah, Theodore Roosevelt as the survivalist is a
Yeah.
great pick too. So, all right, so you can bring one crop with you to help sustain life. What's that crop going to be?
Potatoes.
Potatoes. All right.
I could live on potatoes. I mean, they're so versatile, you could do so much with them and
Yeah, absolutely.
they'll grow, so potatoes.
Yeah. And anytime someone brings up potato, I resist the urge to go Lord of the Rings quote in there. But there's so many
Potato.
things. Yeah,
Yeah.
so many things you
Yep.
can do
You
with
can have a
that.
lot of second breakfasts with that.
Yep. Okay, so if you were to take one year, the next year, and improve one area of your life, what would that be?
Well, I'm kind of already trying to start, but I would say my fitness.
Okay.
I really, really want to lose some weight. I've been struggling with the self-control there a little bit, in many ways, trying to work out every day, like I've been trying to do, fasting, staying under the calorie count I'm trying to
Mhm.
stay in, but not trying to get ripped or anything like that, but I want to be healthier. I want to try and honor the gift of life that God gave me and not trash that. I want to be around for my grandkids maybe one day and not eat myself into an early grave. So I
Yeah.
would say that's really what I want to focus on. But then, living more and more for which kind of ties into what I'm talking about, being healthier, but living more and more for Christ, just really centering him in every aspect of my life, whether it's health, um, my marriage, which, I always try and that's so, so important, by the way, is your marriage for Christ to be the center of that.
Mhm.
Um, all those just really make him the center, intellect, everything. I really want to be focused on him. So that's
Yeah.
probably what I would. do.
All right. When was the last time you laughed till it hurt?
Oh gosh. Um, I'm trying to remember. I mean, I laugh, but the
Hmm.
last time I laughed until it hurt,
Yeah. Or something similar to
uh,
that, or we laughed uncontrollably, that sort of thing.
man, it was actually just the other day, but I can't even remember it. Um, like, because I was reading something that I thought was absolutely ridiculous. It was just absurd, but I can't tell you the specific one. But it was like
Sure.
the other day I was reading a book and um it's on the tip of my tongue. Like it's like I can kind of picture it, but I don't know for some reason I can't get it out. But yeah, I thought it was um pretty funny.
Yeah. All right. What about the last
Probably
time you
the other
cried?
day.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh gosh, the last time I cried. It probably like really, really cried. I'll be
Mhm.
honest, probably when Charlie Kirk died. Like I
Yeah.
don't know what it was, man, but that one just that landed for me. And then I saw this video where like his daughter is just like running up to him, and he
Hmm.
and he picks her up, and I thought about my daughter who's out here running around, and I thought about the fact that like he died basically preaching his faith,
Hmm.
um, and the fact that like he got to go be with the Lord and here, well done, my good and faithful servant. Like I don't know. And then I thought about the Isaiah where it says, it says, "Who shall I send? Lord, send me." Like that
Hmm.
one. Like I don't know. That one really hit. I think that was it. I
Yeah.
think I that was the last time I cried. Um, no, that's not true. I'm like no, yeah, no. It's Charlie Kirk. I did cry when my daughter was born, but I did not cry when Noah was born.
Okay.
I felt like a veteran around then. Like I just
Okay. Yeah.
I was like I've been through this now, so um
Right.
but yeah, so I think that was probably the last time I
Yeah.
I cried.
Okay. And
Matt
this
Walsh
one,
approved times.
yeah. There we go. Um, so this one might need a little bit of interpretation, but so the question is, what does it mean to be good? And I understand, like you said earlier, nobody is good,
Right.
but if you were to try to be, or what is, how to like what the way I try to think of it is, if you're at a funeral and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, here lies so and so, they were a good man, they were a good woman. Like,
Yeah.
what are those characteristics that make up that term?
Yeah. If we're not going like deep into it and it's just a
Mhm.
casual thing, um, then I would put at the very top of, Jesus tells us, love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then the second commandment is a little bit like the first, love each other as you love yourself. How that looks, you could dive deep into that. You could dive into what Paul says about love, that it doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing, this patient kind, all these things. Um, I could dive into that, and say that that's what it
Mhm.
looks. But for me, if you're going to be good, I think that a person who is good is somebody that, honored God, somebody who lived their life trying to obey Him, trying to show others, God, somebody that understands that they weren't good, somebody that when they're in heaven, they know they're not there because of anything that they did. I don't think there's going to be a single person in heaven who is there because they think that they got themselves there. Now, that could look many different ways. I could look at somebody that was in prison for most of their life, but had accepted Christ and
Mhm.
maybe had a ministry there or did a whole bunch of things. And yeah, he had that one blip that wasn't good, but you know, so so do all of us. So I don't know. Like
Yeah.
it's hard for me to answer that question lightly,
Sure.
because I think that being Christian, my identity is just so tied to the fact that like I'm not good. And once I had that realization, but again, I would say somebody that is just honored God. That's how I would have to put it. Someone who's honored God.
Mhm.
That's the only way I can really, I think, uh, someone who is fully trusting in Jesus for their salvation.
Yeah.
I think. was good. Not because of that they're not because that they themselves are good, but because the goodness in them is the Holy Spirit, is Jesus. That's what I
Yeah.
would say.
All right. And then this is the last question. This one might hit home or hit kind of hard, but back to the island here. Things are not going
Yeah,
well. And you can send one last bit of advice out to your family. Once we get past the I love yous and the goodbyes,
yeah.
what is your last, very short bit of advice you would give?
Um, have faith and trust in Jesus. That'd be my last piece of advice. Everything
Mhm.
will fall into place. No matter what happens when you're walking on the waters, don't take your eyes off of him. You know, when the waters are churning and Jesus has called you out upon them, don't take your eyes off of him. You know, don't lose focus. He'll still pick you up when you fall through the waves, when you do lose focus. Uh, but then recenter yourself. Try and keep him in focus because I don't think you could ever become so lost that Jesus will not go out and leave the 99 to come fetch you.
Mhm.
So I think that's a piece of advice that I could give anybody. Trust in Jesus. Now, I'd love to say a lot more, but if I'm
Mhm.
going to give the last piece of advice, and that's the only thing I can give, is that.
Yeah. All right, that's fantastic. Lee, this has been a great conversation.
Yep,
Before I completely end it, I'll give people a chance. I know you said you're working on some projects as an author. Do you want to let people know what you're working on or where they can find any of the stuff that you've done if they want to read into your books, that sort of thing?
sure.
Go ahead and advertise
Yeah.
yourself.
So if you want to find if you want to find me, you can just look up L. R. Monroe on Amazon. I also go by a pen name of Emrys Ambrosius. It's just Merlin twice, but that's what it means. But
Hmm.
you can find that, like, that's a pen name that I go by. You can also go to shadowlightpress.com and then find my author profile. It looks like I'm a Jonin from Naruto. Literally, the artist just took me and made me a Jonin from Naruto. That's my author profile picture. And you can follow Shadowlight's newsletter, and you'll get news and updates every once in a while when I'm sending out something new. I'm also going to be published under Silver Lantern Press, although I don't know if the website's up for that one yet.
Okay.
Um, and so you'll be able to find me there. Um, I'm my Facebook's pretty locked down. You probably won't find me out there, but
Hmm.
I frequent a lot of various groups. I'm in one that debates a lot of theology. So if you're in one of those, you'll probably find me there. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Make sure you send me all those links and I'll make sure they ends up in the description there. But yeah, so I think we're closing out here. I would be
Sweet.
remiss if I didn't say like, subscribe, do all that sort of thing. But at some
Yep.
point in the conversation here, this probably brought one person that you know to your mind. As great as it would be to say, "Hey, I shared this with everybody I know," send this episode to at least the one person that came to your mind when you were thinking of when you were listening to this episode. That would certainly mean a lot to me there. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next one.